Behold the king.
When a friend first suggested I review Ready to Rumble, I went into it with a very different perspective than the one I came out of it with. I vaguely remembered this film fondly from watching it once about 20 years ago, and perhaps like many of you, I thought of it as an inconsequential, goofball, buddy comedy about wrestling.
Wrestling's not fun!
It may end up being a guilty pleasure to rewatch, but would also be pretty easy to pick apart. Exactly what I want at this point in my video, essay, movie review career. I remember Jimmy the King, and thought I could gather clips to use later in my own goal of being recognized online as the king that I am. Like if a viewer said they'll never subscribe, I'd stand up from my throne and say, that's completely fine. But one day, I will rule you! But I was being more selfish than I realized, as I'd entirely misjudged this film as inconsequential to begin with. Before digging a bit deeper and discovering more about this movie's impact on the WCW, wrestling fans,
the biggest disgrace in professional wrestling history,
the downfall of David Arquette's acting career, and in my personal opinion, his eventual redemption.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this. And totally redeem yourself!
For me, this is a case where the story around the movie is even more interesting than the movie itself, and I'm really glad I went down this rabbit hole, and I can share it with those who also didn't know much about that. But I'm not a clickbaiter, so before we dive into the story around the movie, let's get ready to review Ready to Rumble. Released in 2000 by Warner Brothers in association with Bel Air Entertainment, shout out to my fresh subs. Ready to Rumble follows two best buddies, Gordy and Sean, played by David Arquette and Scott Caan, who are sewage workers and huge wrestling fans. With tickets to go watch their favorite wrestler, the undefeated WCW heavyweight champion Jimmy the King, played by Oliver Platt, they're freaking pumped.
We're looking at 2 tickets to Monday Night Nitro Locker Giant tonight! Yes?
But much to their dismay, Jimmy loses the match to Diamond Dallas Page when he is betrayed by evil promoter Titus Sinclair, played by Joe Pantoliano. Gordy and Sean are so upset that they crash the septic truck on the way back from the match. But with the notion that this must all be happening for a reason, they ask themselves, what would King do? And they set out to find the King to offer him help. But when they track him down, the man hardly lives up to the legend. Can they help Jimmy the King get his life back on track and truly redeem himself? In his own eyes and the eyes of his family and wrestling fans alike?
Are you ready?
Find out by watching Ready to Rumble. Since this movie wasn't a critical nor financial success, grossing only about half of its budget, and not being particularly well received even by wrestling fans,
come on, headless muscular guy, you've already got them in a headlock, just squeeze a little harder. Just pop their heads off. You'd be doing the whole world a favor.
I'd like to start off by pointing out some of the things I liked or thought was good about it in a loose Cinema Wins style breakdown.
What's wrong with you?
David Arquette's genuine enthusiasm from being a fan of wrestling shines through in this film. His line readings and facial expressions from his willingness to go all out are a highlight for me. Early on in the movie, Sean, trying to prevent himself from being pranked, says to Gordy,
if you do it, Jimmy King will get hurt tonight.
It's not the best setup, but it is there, and it helps explain why they might feel responsible for and connected to Jimmy's downfall. Whether it be from the gas station clerk, girls, or parents, they suffer from being fans of wrestling and continue anyway. Okay, this is a big one. So even though this movie does fail in its goal, I'll argue it's trying to do a really good thing for wrestling here at the first match, because by showing the behind the scenes in the locker room,
he'll pile drive you, get up on the ropes, and crown you, he's gonna get the win.
Whatever. Works for me. I'll tell the king.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
and showing some of the talking throughout the match,
Ready?
good sound effects.
it allows for those of us who don't normally watch wrestling, because we can't suspend our disbelief, to suddenly buy in on the reality of it. The betrayals, the consequences, the stakes are real. Again, I'm not saying it succeeded, but I'll argue all day that the film is well intentioned as far as trying to get normal viewers to understand and participate in the magic behind wrestling entertainment. The film takes the time to explain how they got to Atlanta and how they recruited help to track down Jimmy. Nothing breathtaking about any of it, but still it's something many films today would consider unimportant and ask you to just accept that they arrived there and tracked him down.
Beer run, right? We can go on a beer run for you.
Beer's good. Beer.
Beer is in fact good.
Beer is good. Let's go drink some beer.
John Cena makes his film debut in this movie. I did not see him. I know he's supposed to be an influence you'd ignore for the sake of your dream, but Gordy's dad saying,
just because it's your dream doesn't make it right or noble or whatever. Charlie Manson was following his dream.
Is spot on with my beliefs. Gordy in the back seat with his dad in the cop car, implying he is a prisoner.
I will kill you if you fuck this up.
Hey, I'm a big fan of the F word, and when PG-13 movies don't put their one free pass in, I feel like they missed an opportunity. Sean saying,
Come on, baby, let's do this. Let's go. Baby, that's it.
shows that he has spent time with the king and is beginning to mirror his language. Gordy's dad getting into wrestling almost makes me smile a bit.
I'd never forgive you for what you did to Sal. You're a mean, mean lady.
Since they didn't flesh out our character beyond working for Sinclair, Gordy not forgiving Sasha is nice. Also, a Scream reunion between these actors, though it is a bit weird they bang in this movie since I imagine them as siblings.
They were siblings! They were siblings, you sick bastard!
Sting not reacting while everyone else does. Now that I've highlighted some of the good, let's take a look at some of the bad. And I promise it's purely a coincidence that the BAD is an acronym for Toilet Humor Entertainment, Bad Accents, and Dumbness. So there's a lot of poo and fart jokes in this movie.
That's gross, Miss McKenzie.
And I'm not so above it all that I don't believe that a fart joke can't be well written or well timed or creative and funny.
True ninja passes no wind. He only passes.
However, the ones in this movie are not. Then someone farted is not well written comedy. With the nuns, they simply reference it after the fact to the audience. You know those nuns that you saw earlier? Well, off screen, they farted. And that's it. Not even a, that must be why they call that one Whoopi, because it's like she sat on a whoopee cushion, am I right? Whatever.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 worst Southern accents in movies.
And they're all fucking Oliver Platt and ready to rumble. Seriously, I like this man as an actor. So it's probably the director's fault for not doing this.
Listen to me, you pair of dumb shits.
This is the worst acting I've ever seen in my life.
But I can barely stand to hear him speak throughout this entire film.
Hey, I ain't even a has-been. I'm a never was.
The ghost of your father just turned his back on you.
I see the director did Varsity Blues before this, and is a producer on The Amanda Show, so I'm just gonna presume it's his fault, and that he thinks terrible southern accents are automatic comedy gold and move on.
Ooh, sporting some tuna.
Dumbness. And this seems to be the biggest one for the wrestling fans, is these two guys were supposed to represent them, and they didn't know how to insert any humor into the story without making these guys idiotic.
Yeah, he like goes full retard. 4 minutes into the movie. Wrestling's not right!
What's that all about, boys?
You definitely could have put them in humorous situations without most of it being derived from them being idiots.
10 minutes into this film, which only wrestling fans would see, and we've been insulted by being portrayed at the bottom rung, mentally, emotionally, financially, and socially. It's like, thank you, WCW, it's very thorough.
But I guess if you think you need to put this obviously pandering scene in this obviously pandering movie to make them cheer, then any wrestling fan saying they were insulted that you think they're dumb is more than a fair criticism in my book. Pander? Pander. Pander. You see, they talk so southern and so stupid that it sounded like pander. But it was really just an unrelated joke about a panda the whole time. And you're just so dumb that you need me to explain it to you. Isn't everything about this hilarious? This movie is at its ugliest when it's wrestling with itself. You can have jokes not land, and it doesn't really matter if they're icing on top the cake of a well-constructed story. Ready to Rumble wants you to root for the king as the good guy and root against Sinclair as the bad guy, but it simultaneously tries to tell a redemption story in a way that puts the movie in a conflict with itself. The king asks why he was betrayed, and Sinclair says,
Why? Why not?
He may as well have laughed maniacally just so you know he's an evil bad man, because the rest of the movie gives you plenty of reasons why. The king shows up late, he's disrespectful, he's lowering the morale of the other wrestlers, he pukes on his own partners, and he's showing up to fights messed up in the first place. He cheats on and abandons his wife and child. He claims his parents are dead, They essentially build the redemption arc out of saying he previously had no redeeming qualities. Sinclair says why not, when he should be saying why would I keep you? Sasha is offered the position of head Nitro Girl, yet the only time we see her perform with the Nitro Girl, she's already presented as such in a unique outfit front and center. What happens after she gets promoted? Is she put in the back with the same outfit as the rest of them? And for a film going out of its way to make him seem evil, it glosses over potentially evil moments from Sinclair without noticing, such as causing Gordy to lose his virginity to someone who doesn't even care about him.
Dear Dad, I am fine. I met this really, really sweet girl, and I'm not a virgin anymore.
It's done. Now can I please get the hell out of here?
Or that he puts Jimmy's unexperienced son into the ring in the first place. Imagine a phone call between them where the king wants to back out of the fight, and Titus plays along until he says, "You know your kid called me? Yeah, he wants to work his way up. I just hope he's careful. Accidents happen and wrestlers get paralyzed or even killed in that ring. What are you saying, baby? If you don't show up to this match, I may just have to put him on the ticket instead." Something like this could actually get me rooting for Jimmy, but the film hardly realizes when it has its real opportunities. While I shouldn't encourage copying, Rocky is a great film that could have been used to build the core story out of with relative ease, putting most of the writing focus on intertwining a more lighthearted tone, comedy, and wrestling elements within this framework. So what could have been a glorious triumph of the human spirit in the end ultimately falls flat for me and apparently damn near everyone. But the good news is, where this movie drops the ball, David Arquette picks it up himself and runs it to the finish line in the true story told in You Cannot Kill David Arquette. It's the redemption story Ready to Rumble wants to be, and it's even better because it actually happened. This is where the fun begins. In 2000, in an effort to promote Ready to Rumble, David Arquette made appearances in the WCW, culminating in becoming the WCW Heavyweight Champion.
WCW World Heavyweight Champion David Arquette. Wait a minute.
He was their champion for a while.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that's when that movie did.
What?
It was a highly controversial moment.
But as it turns out, most wrestling fans didn't like the idea of a Hollywood actor who had never worked his way up in the industry laying claim to such a respected title.
David Arquette as the wrestler sucks.
I don't give a shit about David Arquette.
The blatant misread of the fans, paired with the movie flopping, are what many consider to be the final nail in the coffin for the WCW, although there were plenty of ongoing managerial issues at the time.
And when I told David, he was like, we were walking at the time, I'll never forget it. He stopped, he looked up at me and he goes, no, well, no, really. I go, no, dude, they're putting you over tonight. You're going to be a champion. He goes, no, they can't do that. Like, he's being a fan. He respects what we do. He goes, they can't do that. I go, listen, here's the deal. It's a soap opera. They're picking you tonight. And it really like dumbfounded him for a while. Like, cause am I ribbing him? You know, but he realized, no, I'm not. And then, being the actor that he is, he snapped out of it. He goes, okay, I'm going to be the world champion. And he took it in like he would take in any role. Now, I knew it was not going to be good, but I never believed it would have come across with the heat that it did.
While it wasn't David Arquette's idea to hold the belt, and he was a huge fan, excited to help promote the movie, he became thought of as a stain on the sport, while Hollywood types saw his participation in wrestling as beneath them.
But you should know better than to trust someone from Hollywood! What now?
For us, this is just backstory. For David, it was a failure still lingering with him nearly 2 decades later.
This could be my favorite moment of 2010. Please! Puts Arquette through a table!
His involvement in wrestling really hurt his career.
10 years of rejection. That's crazy.
Despite meaning well, he'd unintentionally disrespected something he loved in the eyes of a lot of people, and after contemplating his life post-heart surgery, he realized how important it was for him to do something about it. He decided he'd earn respect back from wrestling fans in the most honest way possible, one match at a time.
Why do you want to get back in the ring? It's been 18 years of people thinking I disrespected wrestling. I'm just kind of sick of being a joke. There's a lot going on with David.
David Arquette is wrestling?
Yeah.
Did you know this?
Yeah, David Arquette's
covered in blood.
for more facts. Woo-wee! These things really happened.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. But you can imagine what it'd be like if they did, right? Huh?
Randy Macho Man Savage initially declined to appear in Ready to Rumble, stating, "Oh no, I'm currently taking acting classes at Juilliard to fulfill my dream of playing Bonesaw in Spider-Man." But he reconsidered upon learning of Arquette's involvement since he was a huge fan.
Oh yeah!
Former President Donald Trump was so envious of the negative attention Arquette received that it inspired his own run in professional wrestling.
My only regret is I'm no Arquette.
The reboot sequel remake, named Ready to Rumble, is already in production, with Arquette returning this time to play King Gordy. The Rock and John Cena will play his passionate wrestling fans, with an ongoing gag being that they are completely oblivious to their own dominant size and stature. Gee willikers, Gordy, we'd sure been in trouble if you hadn't showed up. Snap back to reality. Through going down this rabbit hole, I gained a lot of respect for him, and by extension wrestling itself. While I understand and agree that he didn't earn the title of heavyweight champion, I do think it's important for wrestling fans and anybody who may watch Ready to Rumble for the first time to now know and add the context of, he also hasn't earned being a stain on wrestling.
I would end up for the last 20 years, like telling people who, like, this guy really is, you know? Because no, not one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. No, he didn't want to be the world champion. Oh, he gave the money that he made on the match to Melanie Pillman. Brian had just died like a year before. And I go, that's who he is.
David Arquette is not a professional wrestler for fame. He's not a professional wrestler for money. He came to my hometown to entertain my hometown crowd because he loves professional. You saw David Arquette on a poster and thought, you know what? I'm going to check this show out. And all David Arquette is doing is bringing awareness to professional wrestling that it deserves.
Growing up, I was a smart kid, and I was around other boys who believed wrestling entertainment was entirely real, while I'd sorted out that it couldn't possibly be. I argued that it was fake and eventually moved on to other interests, thinking I'd outgrown it. But because I never thought about or interacted with wrestling much after that, my view on it never matured much either, outside of my initial reaction to kids around me. And it was through watching his respect, watching his trials and tribulations, and knowing that wrestlers put themselves through that and often so much more for so much longer, that I gained an appreciation that escaped me previously. I went from being one of those people that would think, "Why are you watching that? It's not real," to being in the crowd with the fans, clapping back at someone saying that.
You think it's fake? What's that? Is that fake? Huh? What the hell's wrong with you? That's open hand slap, huh? You think it's fake? You come like that face? Huh? What do you mean? Fake?
Because it's bad form undermining the hard work these people go through, putting their body on the line for the enjoyment and entertainment of others. And how annoyed would you be if every time you watched a movie, there was someone standing there saying, "Wake up. Why are you watching this? It's not real. This is entirely pre-orchestrated for your enjoyment throughout the duration."
Shut up, you twit!
While it seems so obvious now, it's a gap that often isn't bridged between non-wrestling fans and wrestling fans. And for me, it was through David Arquette that I evolved beyond my initial reaction to wrestling and bridged the gap over to a more mature and appreciative one. I hope my Ready to Rumble journey can serve as a perspective shift for some on David Arquette and for non-wrestling fans towards wrestling.
If I can change,
Я думаю, что каждый тоже изменился сегодня.
and you can change,
Вы можете измениться.
everybody can change.
Каждый может измениться.
Being almost entirely an outsider before making this video, I know that I won't be able to give it the time, energy, and effort that it deserves. But I do hope that I've made something that moviegoers and wrestling fans can find value in. For David Arquette, I appreciate your willingness to be open and vulnerable about your struggles, and for whatever it's worth, you earned my respect. I see that you did everything you could to do right by the situation, and that's royal behavior in my book. Thank you for making what I initially carelessly thought would be a really simple movie review into the most complicated video I've ever done. And I recognize that I may be overpraising his efforts relative to all the great known and unknown wrestlers out there. And I think even he would want me to end this video by reminding people to let this be an entry point rather than an ending point for newcomers to wrestling. So in the spirit of making something that honors and respects wrestling, let's close it out.
Wrestling's not fake, guys. Wrestling's not fake. And you have to earn respect in this business. It's not given to you, you earn it. You pay your dues. And right now, you guys are a mile ahead of where you should be paying dues. You guys have the greatest opportunity in the world, in my opinion, to be in the greatest business in the world. Do not f it up. Do not throw it away. Because if you do, you piss on every single person that has come before you. Every single person that has paid their dues, every single person that has busted their ass, every single old-timer that's fairly crippled, that can't stand up, that can't walk, you piss on them. Every single person like Darren Drozdoff, who's a friend of mine, that sits in a wheelchair and can't feel a damn thing from here down, you piss on them. You either want this or you don't. And if you don't want it, don't waste our fucking time.